Hello and welcome to episode 146 of the OmniGamersClub podcast, the podcast about games of all different kinds on platforms, including Zima OS. My name is Mark Uasa.
And I am Daniel Winter, and also joined by Ted the Cat here on, for those joining us on video. I make no promises of editing out that he'll be whinging throughout the entire episode, most likely. So, there he goes.
You never can tell what
It'll be one of those episodes.
Ted is going to do. That's right. Well, here we are, episode number 146. We're going to follow our regular program, 3 courses, an appetizer segment, doing latest developments or things that caught our eye. We're going to do a main course covering a few games, I think, this time. And then an off-topic topic for dessert. Daniel, what do you think? You want to start us off?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a scattershot episode. I'll be honest, I don't think I've played a single game all weekends. The two of us played some more Wild Sea on Friday night. But
That's
other than
right.
that, it's been a beautiful weekend here in Vancouver. Been out enjoying enjoying the nice weather. Went and looked at Free Comic Book Day yesterday. Is that something that you've been following at all, Mark?
I've definitely done it in the past, but I get most of my comics from the library these
Yes,
days.
likewise, yeah.
In graphic novel form or manga form. Sometimes I get it digitally in apps. I think it's a great initiative, though. I wish I could, support Western comics, but it's just go so fast. You drop the cash down for your small little 24-page volume or whatever, and then it's gone in a snap, and then you have to wait to pick up some more. So I do prefer the trade paperbacks these days.
Yeah, I'd not checked out the event in a few years, but just thought it'd be a good time to take my daughter along and see if there's anything of interest to her. The store I chose, unfortunately, does seem to specialize in the single issues, which isn't my preference, to be honest, either. It's a whole other hobby to like collect and store and manage and track your single issues.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, you and I met up on the weekend, and was it the weekend? It was Friday, actually, before our Wild Sea, and we were by Golden Age Collectibles. We almost caught them, but they were shutting down for the night. And I was regaling you about how I used to go down and do my regular routine, which was I would take the sea bus down from the Lonsdale Quay at the bottom of Lonsdale in North Vancouver over to the bottom of Granville, basically, and walk up, and I would hit 3 spots. I would hit Sam the Record Man, A&B Sound, another record shop, and to round it out, the 3rd spot I'd always hit is Golden Age Collectibles. Used to be in a different spot. It was twice the size. It had actually, literally, half of it was sports memorabilia. It was like sports trading cards, like baseball and football cards and things like that. But they've shrunk considerably. They carry fewer game stuff now. But they still keep up the traditions of selling single comics, and I have fond memories of them.
And they're still going. I don't know if you want to date yourself in how long ago that was.
Oh, I don't mind. That was squarely in I guess that would have been the late 80s, early 90s or whatever when I was there. No, I would have been at least in my early teens, so that would have placed it in the early to mid 90s. Yeah.
Okay.
So still a while ago, I was reading like Jim Lee era X-Men. So if that pegs me at a certain era, but that was a good time to be into comics. Like Cable was popular, and I think Deadpool was just getting kind of started. So yeah, the echoes of that era are still around. So yeah, definitely, I have a fond connection with American style comics.
Excellent. Well, I've been reading a few, maybe coming to a dessert course near you one of these weeks. Speaking of which, when we were at Golden Age, we also tried to go to Jollibee across the road and bring a report on the Final Fantasy XIV themed meal they had there. Unfortunately, the lines were too long, and it was actually surprisingly expensive for like a one-person meal, seemingly like $30 for a meal box. So I guess there's a bit of a price premium on whatever code or crystal juice comes with that meal.
I don't know. I think Jollibee is just expensive in general. I don't know if it's not like the chickens are imported or something like that.
The chocobos, maybe. I don't know if they're getting those fresh.
Possibly. I don't know why it's so mysteriously expensive. But I would like to eat it. But there's other good places to get Filipino food in Vancouver.
Absolutely. Anyway, I guess we should get to some gaming topics. What's on your mind, Mark?
Yeah, just a scattershot of news. I think there's actually been too much news to even share. And I think we've been a little bit unevenly tilted towards bummers a lot in the past. So I want to have a bit of a share. I'm going to have a good news, bad news sandwich, if that's all right. And I don't have to
Bummer sandwich.
I don't have to do three stories in order. So one positive bit of news I saw while checking out the, lifestyle goods blog High Consumption was that Evercade, which is a company that produces retro gaming hardware, not the kind that where you load up ROMs or whatever, but they will produce replica machines. You know, you see them in Best Buy and things like that a lot, of like Pac-Man and Frogger and things. So they're officially licensed and branded with whatever it is, Tecmo or Bandai or whatever made the games originally, Namco. So they've been producing cool hardware for a while. So it turns out that they are producing two
There's
new.
something in the air tonight, Mark. The cats are all hell's breaking loose.
It's true. We're just slaves to our cats. They really run the show. So Evercade is producing two new portable pocket-sized game handhelds, and they're clamshells, and they look pretty darn slick. And they're based on two platforms that I don't have a lot of first-hand experience with. One more than the other. The other because it was not so popular in North America. And I'm talking about one of the handhelds they're releasing is the ZX Spectrum. Are you familiar with the ZX Spectrum, Daniel?
I've heard of it. I couldn't name a game that's on that platform, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. It's really more popular in the UK and perhaps outside in Europe as well. But whenever you hear about European gaming, retro gaming of that period, ZX Spectrum is listed a lot. So that's one of the consoles. And the other one is more familiar to myself. I probably played it or had my hands on it at some point, is the Commodore 64. So these two, the ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64, were more like home PCs that also played games. So I'm a little unsure how these games are going to work out. They don't have full-size keyboards on them. They just have, D-pads, front-facing buttons, and then some function keys. And maybe you can, maybe you can USB a keyboard onto them as well if you want to do more computer-y type stuff. But I am really interested to think about being able to play some old-school CRPGs and maybe some graphical adventure games that were popular on that era of hardware. So I'm kind of excited. And these look to be pretty, powerful machines. They're going to be 800 by 480 display, 256 megs of RAM, which is considerably way more than those original pieces of hardware ever had. So I'm kind of excited. These seem like a little bit more like collector's pieces than the multi-system ones that have much better specs that you and I have been covering on a few episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken several times about how I very much value the plug-and-play behavior of consoles, essentially, and I don't really have the time or patience to tinker and try and optimize these things as I've been struggling with on some of my retro consoles. So I can absolutely see the appeal of something like this. It's a little more specialized. Even if it is more sort of one use only. I mean, I'm not sure how much you can customize these things. My understanding is you can load up your legally obtained ROMs, shall we say, but they do come with, I think, 25 games preloaded. So assumedly they've sorted out the rights of all that. It's a little bit like the Nintendo mini consoles that you could get, I guess. But you can, in this case, at least load up more games. Only for that console, I presume. I'm not sure if they're compatible with other console emulation, but it's some flexibility there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty darn cool that they do include the games in their hand-selected list, and presumably they're going to be of the more popular titles of those platforms. And it's kind of nice to know that a machine has been created dedicated to support one platform, because you better hope that it's going to support that platform well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about those two hardware releases.
Excellent. I'm not familiar with the producer for what it's worth, if they have a decent reputation, but we'll see. Bit of news that I was interested in. A few episodes or a few months ago, I spoke about the video game Ambrosia Sky, which has been a highlight at the Vancouver Game Garden. It's a Canadian-made game about this sort of sci-fi story of basically power wash simulator going into these spaceships and cleaning off all these mushroom gunk and things, but same, not just cleaning the physical space, but also cleaning up the emotional baggage of returning home and these spaces where you used to live and people that you used to know. Curiously enough, in terms of crossing the omnigaming stream, they have released a TTRPG. I believe this is a free sort of brochure-style short solo journaling TTRPG. Let me see if I can get this name right. You left home and became a sci-fi death cleaner, and now you must return home, and your ex is there. Or for short, obviously, YLHABASDCANYMRH. So you can. I'll put the link for this in the show notes. I haven't had a chance to read through the rules yet, but I did read through a playthrough. Like one of the community manager over at Soft Terrains, Colin Cummings, posted like a playthrough of his journals going through the game. Curiously, as I was talking about the aspect of cleaning up in this game, you reflect that by cleaning up your room. So obviously we're all needing for excuses to gamify our chores. And this is you're basically picking physical artifacts throughout your house and sort of channeling some of the story through those. So I thought it was a cool concept. And again, exploring the same themes, the same story and setting through a different gaming lens. So always fun to see.
That is cool to hear that maybe you might get some household chores done at the end of a gaming session. Can't say that about most every other game that you play. Most of the time you have to do a significant cleanup to put away a game when it comes to tabletop. Yeah, that's really cool. My meat in the good news, bad news sandwich that I was mentioning, I'm going to mention, is only so bad. I guess it's like a concerning bit of news. So there was a bit of confusion, I think, this last couple of weeks about a patch that Sony was put out or was intending to put out. Apparently there was some confusion. A couple of individuals online accused Sony of putting a new secret DRM in place that made the game that you purchase digitally through their online platforms make a check to see if you log on every month to see whether you can retain the license to play that game. And if it fails to run that check, then you would lose access to that game for forever. And it seems like the wording of the patch notes was confusing. Sony came around with a press release or official statement anyways to say that, no, you don't have to check every month to see if a game will run, but the system will have to check online at least once to ensure that a game that you purchased online can be played. Now, it's a little bit strange. I mean, a lot of people will say, well, what's the problem? I have the internet.
Because, I mean, presumably you need the internet to download the game in the first place. Unfortunately, if you download it but don't launch the game, it's not going to trigger that DRM check.
Right. Or you purchase it and then, I don't know, you download it and then, I don't know, there's World War IV or something like that, and then there's no internet ever, then how can you play that game? So a lot of people will say, well, these concerns kind of seem a bit outlandish, like you're blowing things out of the water here. Now, this article that I read this on was on Polygon, and it was an opinion piece, so it's not, like cutting news or whatever like that. It was just sharing the general cause for concern that DRM of any kind, especially of this type that requires online checks, are unfair in the sense that you shouldn't have to jump through hoops to prove that you own something if you bought it, right? And I do much prefer platforms like GOG, which offer DRM-free versions of software. So you buy it, you download it, and you never have to check ever again. It's yours. You can install it on however many machines you own, and you can share it with friends if you want to responsibly. I don't condone piracy. I don't condone file sharing to individuals who don't own a copy. But, I do believe that if you own something, you should own it. And you should have perpetual rights to it.
Yeah, I mean, these days it's pretty much standard that you're buying the license to something temporarily. I mean, one of these days Steam won't be around anymore, and we will just lose access to all of those games. I could have sworn that this sort of DRM checking was already normalized across all of the console, at least the major consoles. I guess not. I know they've been trying to implement these checks various times over the years. I guess enough backlash had caused them to back off, and they tried to sneak it through again.
Yeah, well, I'm still not pleased with Nintendo for how they've limited the access to digital titles across Switch devices. It causes me like untold frustration, at least once a week.
I still can't figure out those virtual game carts.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody can figure them out. Nobody can figure out what they're good for except for Nintendo keeping tabs on which games people in your network play. So I'm not pleased about that. And, yeah, you shouldn't assume, you shouldn't assume whatever is going to happen. What if I'm like, whatever, deployed in military and I don't have steady internet connection or something like that, or I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or something like that, you can't presume about these sorts of things.
Even people living in, North America or Canada here in like rural areas did not have steady internet access, let alone other parts of the world. So it is not a given.
That's right. You can't assume about these things, so you should just let people keep what they have. But anyways, that's a bit of soapbox talk. How about yourself, Dan? You got more news?
Yeah, one bit of crowdfunding news. We recently talked about Vancouver's playtesting scene, and one of those, I believe we mentioned him during that episode. Jeremy Rosenhart is coming up with a new project called One Card Wonders. And it's going to include 16 one-card games. There's a few different mechanics in there, some social games, some dexterity games, some sort of two-player dueling games. Some of those, or at least one of those, is designed by Sebastian Bernay-Wong, who we'd also mentioned from Firestarter Games. And I believe at least a couple of others are also sort of collaborations with other local designers. So I'll put the link for that in the show notes. Thought it's a cool twist and experimenting with some different design ideas. So check out One Card Wonders.
Good. Love to see local indie game design flourishing. That's great. Sounds like a cool project. Okay, here's the other bread on my good news, bad news sandwich. A little bit of good news more about Canadian game design. This one is from Rascal News. Apparently, the inaugural Canada Rolls Awards celebrates Canadian RPGs, and that's what the title of the story is. I read through it. This is not, like a awards ceremony, like the Game Awards for video games or whatever, that's televised or anything like that. It's just an online thing. But essentially, you check out that article, which we will share the link for on our show notes, and then you can see the nominees. There's a variety of categories, and you can see who was nominated for them. I'll just mention one of the games. It's called A Fool's Errand by lead designer Jay Stroutman, and designer and art director B. Marsolier has been nominated for 2 categories, for instance. So these are pretty much all Canadian developed and published indie TTRPGs, and awards like this will do, I hope, and shows like this will do wonders for sharing a little bit of light on some indie TTRPGs that come out of Canada.
Yeah, so this is being organised by Compose Dreams, who are like an online retailer. I've spoken to them. They've had booths at the last couple of TCTC conventions. I spoke to the organisers there, and got some great, had some nice discussions about the local design scene. I did see this year that I saw the nominations that they had set up. I was a little confused, and I was also just completely brain not working as part in terms of organising that convention. Didn't really have the mental space to sort of think through what TTRPGs have I played that are Canadian, and I don't know. I do wonder if it seems that their focus was on collecting these nominations at conventions like TCTC and Breakout Con, and how many people are going to be in that right mindset to prepare nominations in advance, or like, I don't know, it feels like it's sort of a more robust online submission system where it's going to be, you can sort of think through the options and put your, use words better, I guess, as you're making that. I believe there were online nominations. It's just that they were thumbing the scales a little bit with the in-person nominations getting an extra point or something. But no, it was great to see the selection they had there of indie TTRPGs. The one other issue I had was that it is quite a little bit ambiguous, shall we say, with games where there's multiple creators involved, and maybe one of them is Canadian, so many games these days are collaborations with people across the world, and it's a little hard to say at what point is something Canadian made.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, these sorts of problems exist for anything like music albums and movies and things like that. I think you can split the hairs in many different ways. I just imagine any significant contribution by a Canadian, maybe writer, illustrator, publisher, what have you, would get itself included. And it's definitely utilizing online voting. One thing I didn't mention was that we'll share the link, but there is still time if you are Canadian to actually vote and have your voice heard towards this awards tally as well. The end is for May the 15th. So in just a couple of weeks here since our episode recording time. So not too long at all. But if you're hearing this right when it's published, you'll have a few days yet to have your voice heard. So we'll share the link for that. And maybe there'll be a write-in if you know of a Canadian title that's not listed.
Yep, no, absolutely. I didn't mean to sound too negative there. I am always excited for opportunities to showcase indie creations, and particularly Canadian creations, as we often do here. So definitely going to be looking through those nominations and seeing what I've missed.
Yeah, I think you can lobby a lot of complaints to kind of like any award show, like a lot of the Emmy nominations, for instance. There's no guarantee that the people that voted for those things even watch those movies, right? The people usually vote for the thing they heard about, whether they've actually experienced it or not.
There's always a way of gaming the system there, right? It's hard to make it foolproof.
It's true. There's lobbying, all sorts of stuff. So award shows in their own right have some challenges to go with them. Mm-hmm. All right. Daniel, any more fresh topics?
Yeah, just one final thing I wanted to quickly mention that I had in my mind that I'd like to try playing some TTRPGs with my daughter. I mean, I have picked up a couple over the years that would probably require a larger group if I can never convince her friends to give them a try. But I've been meaning to look into some other options for, like, are there any two-player games that would be appropriate for the kids? One thing that I was took note of is that literally just yesterday here in Vancouver, there was a TTRPG Kids Con. A convention dedicated to sessions for children. My daughter's a little too young for that yet. I think they start at 8, I think, is when they can start participating. But having missed out on that, I did also just come across one of our friendly local game stores, a new product that I hadn't heard about called 10 one-page role-playing games for younger players. And this is all games by Grant Howitt, who many will know. I believe... What was the game that you'd played recently? Was it?
It was Lasers and Feelings.
Okay, yes.
And which I have definitely played. I think that's Grant Howitt. And also he was, of course, the writer of Eat the Reich.
I was thinking that I wasn't 100% sure. Great.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
also published by Rowan, Rook and Deckard. But this isn't actually a book. This is like a folio with a bunch of literally one-page sheets that you can pull out individually, and like double-sided, nicely printed sheets. So looking forward to checking out some of those. At least one of them, Honey Heist, many people will be familiar with.
Yeah, I played Honey Heist once. That was pretty fun. Yeah, Grant Howitt is responsible for the words of Eat the Reich, and Will Kirkby did the art. And
excellent. Very cool.
Very cool. All right, shall we move into our main topic?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So you said you had a few games. You're just going to kind of sprinkle and touch upon them, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that I wanted to be a little more proactive in the games that I play and sort of focused a little more. As last week in our sort of Game Pass episode, the other thing is I also want to be more intentional about the games I stop playing, and like rather than forcing myself to continue, I've been a little more discriminating, shall we say, these days in trying to get to the good stuff and like with limited time. So it's a few I want to talk about that I just want to go through fairly shallowly and discuss some of my findings. Shall I just jump into that and leave yours later?
Yeah, start us off.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what really started this was I've been in the mood for basically games like Morrowind. As is always my eternal quest chasing that dragon. I mentioned it last week that I'd read a couple of articles about that. I'd put into mind of a couple of games that came out in the last few years that had evoked that. Anytime someone says, it's like Morrowind, but it's pretty much an easy purchase for me. So the first one of those that I had played recently is a little game called Dread Delusion. So this came out in 2024 by Lovely Hellplace and published by Dread XP. And I mean, just to look at this, it's obviously evoking a lot of that more weird fiction, giant mushrooms, weird fiction in terms of like living gods, and very much thematically interested in the sort of the way that gods have an impact on this world. They're sort of manifested in a very physical sense. And I've checked this out, and I was surprised to find that other than that sort of that aesthetic, it's not really like that at all. In fact, it plays a lot more like, I guess, something like Quake or Doom. It is a first-person game where it's sort of semi-open world, small areas, sort of. You're sort of sectioned off into smaller areas that you can explore within, like hub and spoke areas, I guess. But within that, you're basically just running around pretty rapidly, fighting monsters, collecting like very Doom-style collectibles. It almost feels a bit like a Banjo-Kazooie collectathon, the way there's the secret areas and picking up upgrades and abilities and things. It plays a lot more like a first-person shooter, basically. It just happens to be set in this really weird, fantastical setting. It is very aesthetically unique. It's got these the sky is sort of being pulled apart in this sort of reality warping sense, and floating islands and giant creatures floating around, and very cool vibes. It does have this really weird, like the graphic design is it's preceding sort of Morrowind, more in the sort of the PS1, like Quake era, I guess. The very rudimentary textures and graphics in a way that I believe is probably intentional, but it always seems like reality is still settling. Like the textures are still shifting. Every time you move, you can see the textures moving in relation to each other, like sort of the skin on milk, sort of not quite. It's not quite sitting solidly. It's a quite interesting sort of nostalgic vibe, I guess, if you're a fan of games from that era. In terms of the role playing elements, though, I don't know if it really did much for me. There you do have like stats, like I think about half a dozen stats really, like your persuasion and stealth abilities for picking locks and traps and things, but it's all fairly rudimentary in that the only way to level up is actually to find those collectibles, and that is a cool touch where you're encouraged to explore and try and look off the beaten path and try and find some of those. That's the only way to level up, is finding those things. It does get a little repetitive though. Like you start to intuit where things are going to be hidden, and there's only so many ways in which you're interacting with the world. It's like just looking for collectibles starts to get a little bit repetitive, I think. And rather than those skills sort of changing the way you interact with the world, it was very much more of a binary of like, well, I come across this quest, I need to have X persuasion to move along it. I don't have persuasion. Okay, I guess I ignore that. It doesn't really give you an option of like, are you going to use the stealthy way or the brute force way? It was more just do you hit this gate or not? Yes or no. Otherwise, go somewhere else, I guess. So I didn't find it particularly engaging in that regard. The stories that the game is telling are really cool, with some like weird haunted reality shifting monsters and creatures, and that's all fascinating. But the way that it was telling the story, I don't know, didn't quite hit for me, so I kind of bounced off of that, I think.
Yeah, I definitely have fond memories of Morrowind. It just had some certain magic to it that even later games like Oblivion and Skyrim in that series didn't never really recaptured. Maybe it was because of the magical setting, or maybe it was because of the writers, or maybe it was even some of the technical limitations of the platform of the original Xbox that the game was running on. But there's something about it is just so alive that I
Well,
really appreciate.
reading through some of the histories on Morrowind specifically, and it feels like so many of the creative decisions there were led by like, this is our last game. Like we're gonna go big. We're gonna make the game that we want to make, and like just expectations be damned, basically. And that's the game that they wanted to make. And whereas since then, it's like they've been a prisoner of their own success and trying to emulate and trying to capture what's going to be popular increasingly so, and trying to hit a much more wide stream. Trying to hit a much more mainstream audience, and so they've again become a bit of a victim of their own success there.
Yeah, Oblivion was a real kind of downer when compared to Morrowind. I think there's a lot of good qualities to it. I actually think it's a little bit better than a lot of people give it credit for, but it is definitely a step down from Morrowind in terms of creativity. I know a little bit more about the second game on your list. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, bouncing off from Dread Delusion. The other game that I'd had on my list to try and chase that nostalgic vibe was a little game called Outward. It's been on my backlog for a while, but I'd seen the Side Story podcast were talking about it recently, and which reminded me to check that out. It also had been evoked in terms of the Morrowind vibes of exploring this world, and it's definitely much more of an open world game. You're dropped into this fairly interesting setting where it's like you basically have debts. Like the society here is all based on blood debts. Like you have to pay for the sins of your family members, and that provides a nice friction point of like, well, you owe this amount of money. You have to try and scrounge that together, go off into the world to try and earn that. Interestingly, it's more of it has a level of sort of simulation, but in terms of like heats and food and drinking, it's constantly tracking all that. I mean, hey, playing Morrowind, I often played mods that added those onto it, adding another layer of sort of immersion onto that world, and this definitely has that immersion. And you basically is that there's a big focus on like capacity and like hiking. It always feels like a little bit of walking to Mordor simulator, where like you literally have a backpack that limits how much you move, and like when you start combat, you can like throw the backpack on the ground and like have a more mobile fight, and then go and pick up your backpack again, and very much focus on how much can you fit in your pockets, how much can you fit in your backpack. So a lot of granularity in the sort of systems that it's simulating there. You said you were familiar with this one, Mark?
Yeah, I've played through the first couple of hours of Outward. I actually own it on a couple of platforms for some reason because I told myself this is a game I'm going to play, this is a game I'm going to get into. And some of the reason behind that why I was intrigued is because some of the promise, this isn't like a clone of Morrowind. In fact, it's a lot more low fantasy from the outset than Morrowind's, just floating silt striders and levitating wizards and things like
It
that.
feels more like Gothic, I guess, so some of the other Eurojank RPGs from the 2000s.
Yeah, and I kind of, I'm not afraid of indie developers or publishers. Like I've said on previous episodes, I kind of look to kind of B-tier games for at least trying to do things. And that is kind of the promise of this game, is that they promise to focus much more on systems, on things like concepts like survival, and they always promise to like not do any shortcuts. Like, if you want to achieve something, like you're not going to get there quickly. You're not going to have like these leaps of logic or coincidences that vault you towards the hero of the land or whatever overnight. You're going to have to earn it.
The
and
world doesn't really care about you as a player, right?
that's right.
Your player's character.
It cares so little about you that you can die on the first night from freezing or not eating or whatever.
It is a hard game. I died a lot. So curiously, you never actually die. Like it always fades to black, and there'll be a little blurb like, "Oh, a hunter found you like bleeding out at the side of the road and dragged you back into town," or "The bandits captured you and dragged you into this cell, but like many weeks later, you managed to break your way out." And like, it's a cool concept. I think some of them do get a little repetitive. Like I got caught by the bandits several times, and like, okay, back to the jail cell, I guess.
This guy again. Yeah. Something about it though, I think I don't know if it was like the narrative or like the world. Like I guess I want a little bit of that fantasy, because of course we are playing these games because we want escapism, right? And entering a world of different kind of drudgery, virtual drudgery, is a little bit depressing. So maybe that was what turned me away from it, but still something in my mind is telling me you got to go back to that and finish that game sometime.
I didn't find the actual world interesting to explore. Is part of my issue. Like, if you have a destination in mind and it's all about trying to find a way to get there, that can be compelling in terms of planning the adventure and slowly walking there. But you're not going to find much along the way. Like, there's only half a dozen locations on the map, and they're all like they're all flagged on your map. But it's like, oh, here's 2 troglodyte dungeons, here's 2 bandit dungeons, and like, there's not really much to find, no story or narrative to sort of, nothing emergent to happen along the way, really, to make that journey interesting.
And that's kind of like realistic too, right? Because like the world isn't like Morrowind or any other Elder Scrolls game. You don't have adventure every 10 steps out when you walk across the countryside, right? Most of the countryside of any country, unless it's in the middle of a city, is empty and devoid of life. So it's not that that's so strange, but that is kind of strange in a game where you expect adventure to be around every corner.
Well, if it made it more about the journey, like turn it into like Euro Truck Simulator or something, the fantasy hike version of that, hey, I could find that compelling. But it's in this weird middle ground where you're still expected to do the adventuring on the side, but I didn't find that particularly engaging. Combat's a bit, I mean, it's also just really hard, like, in a way I didn't find particularly compelling. I'm sure I could find interest in this game over time. I don't have the time to squeeze that juice out, right?
Yeah, maybe it is a kind of a balancing act that the team didn't elegantly pull off, right? Like there's always like a promise, an intriguing promise that a dev can make, but can they actually achieve it? I'm not sure.
Well, one through line I saw in a lot of the reviews, including side stories, is a number of people who said that this game is only good co-op. You can play 2-player, and basically you can have your Frodo and Sam, and like just have one player carrying all the potatoes, basically. And obviously it'd be a fairly easier game, I think, in many regards in that sense, and also a better sense of like more opportunities for that emergent storytelling in terms of bouncing off of each other.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I had no idea that it was co-op play enabled, so that does sound somewhat intriguing, especially if you are a fan of other kind of medieval type survival games like your Valheims or things like that.
It did remind me a lot of Valheim, yeah, I will say, yeah. But
Valheim,
perhaps we should try that sometime.
Yeah. Well, Valheim is another game I never really got myself into, so I could probably stand to try out both of those games again. Very cool. Any other games in your Morrowind search?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly bounce off another game that I discovered via Side Story. That they recommended a little game called Elderfall, which apparently has been in production for a long time. It's coming to early access later this year, at least so they currently are saying. But they've recently put out a demo that I checked out, and I think this is actually probably the highlight of the 3 for me. It is, a semi-open world fantasy adventure game, first person. Feels a lot like I don't want to rate all of these games in comparison to Morrowind. I think that's unfair. I think this provides an interesting lens for what I'm searching for in these games, but it does have a lot of that. Going into dungeons, there's a lot of cool focus on just like paying attention to the little things, like digging around on the side, and I found like sort of potions hidden away. Like same way in Morrowind, you used to like have to levitate up to like the little alcoves hidden at the top of caves. And this game has levitation potions, so it's very much going for that vibe. The cool thing, it does have skills like, survivalists or mysticism, and I think it's got like several different schools of magic. It seems to be paying, like, it's using that more for like the Fallout New Vegas sort of system of tags, where you're talking to a character and you'll have options based on what skills you have. Rather than, it's not necessarily a dice roll, you just have extra options based on what your skills are. So I thought that's a cool sort of role-playing element. The story that I saw was quite cool. Look, I only played a couple of hours of this, just enough to know, hey, I want to play more of it when it eventually comes out. The one downside was it did feel very rudimentary. I mean, the graphic design is fairly low poly, like something reminiscent of something like Rune. What's the MMO RuneScape?
RuneScape, RuneQuest, I don't know.
Fairly simple. Yeah. I mean, that's fine. I think that it utilizes that style quite well, but a lot of the UI elements felt very placeholder. And I'm not sure if that is going to be changed in the early access or final version. I hope so. Make it just a little. I want a little more polish in the presentation. But the actual gameplay did leave me. Did leave a really good first impression.
Well, your basic description sounds pretty intriguing to me, and if it was only a demo, there's all the promise in the world that it could be more polished when the final comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of love for early access games. I generally want to wait for the 1.0. I don't know. Maybe I need that itch scratched just enough that I'll jump on this one anyway. We'll see.
We'll see. All right. Does that cover the extent of your Morrowind search?
For this episode, yes. I have actually found another game, also from Side Story of all things, that is actually scratching the itch in a very different direction that I'll possibly cover next episode.
Maybe it's a never-ending quest.
Oh, it's chasing that dragon. You never actually quite reach it.
All right. Speaking of questing and journeying, I'm going to talk about a very different game. This is not a long game, but I guess, I played it till its completion, so I'll talk all about it. The game I played is a 2018 game, so not that old. It's called Far Lone Sails by developer Locomotive, a Swiss developer. I don't know if I've played many Swiss games in my experience. Publisher is Mixed Vision, and the game has been released on lots of stuff. It's probably on mobile at this point. It's was originally released on Windows and Mac 2018, PlayStation, etc., 2019, Switch, etc. And I played it on the Nintendo Switch Lite. So what is this game? This is a not prototypical. This is a typical go-right game. There are lots of different go-right games. I haven't played a lot of them, to be honest, but it's a very easy to understand concept.
Your Limbo, your Inside. I recently talked about Planet Lana, the first one. It's got a sequel recently.
Right. So the premise is very, very simple. You just go right. And if you run into impediments, then you try and get around them, and you want to keep going right until eventually you cannot go right any longer. And the story ends. And that's essentially what this game promises too. This game is different to a lot of those other games you mentioned in kind of setting and some of the mechanisms. So the setting is quite mysterious. It's a little bit drab. It's not explained very clearly. I think it's kind of like a post-apocalypse world. So you start off in this like little shed, and you're like praying or something over a grave, and you can only presume that that's your last relative or something like that. Nothing's tying you down, so you set off on an adventure.
A lot of these games try to go on vibes and sort of emotional resonance they don't tell you an explicit story. It's very much sort of language independence, just sort of communicating through actions and background settings and things like that. Environmental storytelling.
Yeah, and I think that that's an admirable goal. I think that's really cool. A lot of early console games that probably you and I have played many of didn't have a lot of dialogue, maybe no dialogue at all, maybe no menus, maybe it was just go right. Like Ninja Gaiden was a go right game too, right? They just had levels and projectiles and other things. So in this sense, this is a very like kind of true to like gamey games kind of a game. It's like you're playing with the mechanisms, and the story is very light. There's not a single cutscene. There's not a single line of dialogue.
You're in
And
the game for every moment, right? From A to Z.
yep, and there's no cuts. There is a mechanism, of course, if you want to stop playing, you can go to sleep and wake it back up again. But essentially, you can play this from start to finish in one sitting, because this is a very short game. This is probably like a 4-hour game. I don't know. I didn't time myself, but I finished it over three very short sittings. So let me explain a little bit more about this game. So I said you're in this post-apocalyptic world. Your character is this like very indistinct little blob of a character. They have like 5 polys to them. There's a very, very small, indistinct humanoid dressed in kind of this red cloak. And the one distinctive thing about your character is that when he or she, jump off of a high platform, they kind of flutter down using their kind of cloak as I guess like a Mary Poppins style umbrella to rescue themselves. So there's not a lot of not a lot of harm or danger in this particular game too. There is one sequence where you can fail rather disastrously, but no, your character yourself doesn't face harm, but maybe the other character in the game does. And that other character is pretty prominently featured, at least in the artwork for this game. The other character is your vehicle. So this is a go-right game that features a companion character. It's a large vehicle that you can step inside. You find it very, very early. It's right there when you leave the farmhouse or whatever you start in. But this character morphs and grows and evolves over the course of the game, and you get intimately familiar with its interiors and its workings, and that is an aspect of the game that I enjoyed quite a bit. I like games where you kind of like have a party, and you gel with them and you use each other's strengths, and you're like a unit. This game is very much like that, but in this case, you're operating a machine. And, that's really the core of the game mechanisms here. So the machine is a little bit nondescript at the beginning. It's just kind of this, like, the entire game is presented from the side perspective, of course, being a 2D game. And you see it from the outside. You step inside this little platform ramp, and then you're inside, and then you see a cutaway cross-section of the machine. And it has a distinctive front, and then it has a distinctive back, and it has a big wheel and a small wheel, and then it has a sort of engine, and it has a button. You can push it, and you have to push it down really hard, and it goes until your fuel runs out. There's a very distinctive fuel gauge, and there are canisters of fuel sitting around. There's a couple in your vehicle, and pretty soon you'll see that the fuel is dwindling bit by bit. But thankfully, you can find additional cans of fuel along the way. And you're always like feeling a little bit of dread. You're always feeling a little bit uncertain. When's the next fuel canister coming? When can I top up my fuel? You're always feeling a little bit desperate.
Do you ever actually run out, though? Or is that a bit of an illusion, that friction?
No, you absolutely can run out. Especially if you don't, I say you fail. You can choose not to pick up every canister of fuel, right? Because there's this like little play back and forth of, do I try and maintain my momentum and keep going as far as I can with the fuel that I have, or do I start and stop in little dribbles and just make my slower progress? And of course, always the temptation, if you have a vehicle, is to just go far and go fast. So if you're going certain speed, you might not have time to stop your vehicle. And even when you do stop your vehicle, you might quickly, you lose momentum. So there's some interesting play there and choices in what you can do. If you ever do run out of fuel, you can drag the vehicle by hand. There is a kind of a latch at the front or the back, which you can manually grab with your character, because the only thing your character can do is jump or grab objects. They have nothing else that they can do. Of course, they can, push objects. They can push objects, so that's a third thing, I guess. They can push objects like that control switch, or they can grab other tools like a water hose or a repair tool in the vehicle.
There are like puzzles as part of that, though, right? In terms of what you're
Absolutely.
pushing and pulling and the order in which you do things.
Exactly, yeah. But the vocabulary of what you can do is limited, and but there are lots of variations in how you mix those up. So yeah, if you ever do run out, you can pull your vehicle, and thankfully you won't have to pull it too far, otherwise it'd be a very slow game. One of the first few upgrades you get for your vehicle is the titular sails. So this game doesn't start with sails, but eventually you will find an upgrade. You don't really know what it is until it gets installed, and it's this deployable sail that can open up on top. Of course, this is a land vehicle, but you can install this set of sails, and it opens up this really tall, wide, kind of interesting-looking triple sail system. And where it's windy, you can deploy it, and you can use that to carry you aloft and just sprint forward.
So you're largely traveling through this fairly open desert environment, right?
For the most part, yeah. There are large desert sequences. There are snowy, frozen tundras. There's a little bit of water.
Like wide open space, broadly.
Yeah, I would say that's the bulk of it by distance traveled. But most of the time, gameplay-wise, will be you actually standing stock still, because you will be literally blocked at various points. So I said you can get the sails, but disappointingly, there is not a lot of wind in this game. I would say that maybe like less than 20% of the game has wind, so you're largely not going to be utilizing the sails that are in the game's title. So that's a little bit disappointing. But you'll find that there's other ways to keep your vehicle going. There's other upgrades you'll find as well. I don't want to spoil them all, but all in all, there was probably about half a dozen upgrades that you can install on your vessel, and it can gain interesting capabilities, and eventually operating the ship, because it's very much, it's like very much like you're like a one-man band. There are lots of these different stations, and the different stations are actually spread out somewhat far.
It's like being on the bridge of a spaceship and having to go to the various stations to activate them. It's all very delayed gratification, this physical space. To be clear, I played about an hour of this. I think it was when I dropped Game Pass, and unfortunately that's why I wasn't able to finish it.
Right, I had a purchase copy of this, and it's pretty cheap to get sometimes, so you can easily find it for probably, a $5 or a $10 Canadian, various times of the year. This is a slightly older game too, as well. And I'll give the spoiler. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to play for a short amount of time. I like that give and take that of operating your ship. There's something kind of hypnotic or similarly frustrating but rewarding about caring for and maintaining an object, similar to another game that we played, probably the last game that featured a companion that was a vehicle. It was the survival horror game Pacific Drive.
Yes,
Right,
and sort of a very immersive sense of friction, like the way you're having to go about to actually do all of these physical elements of the game is like this immerses you in that interaction with that that vehicle.
They intentionally make the operation of this ship vehicle challenging, and when you do it, you feel a great sense of achievement, because it's kind of like spinning plates. If you're doing it well, and you actually have to use a little bit of platforming ability. I said this game doesn't have a lot of challenge, but just basically doing the task and then doing the task well is a considerable amount of difference. So jumping between the stations, operating things, pressing the button to make the ship run, grabbing the excess fuel tanks that you collected separately, loading them up into the fuel canister, pressing the load button, running back to the press forward button to keep it going again at top speed, and then drawing the camera out, because you have pretty fine camera control in this. You can zoom in pretty close. You can zoom out very far. And you will have to zoom out because you'll get so caught up in just the operations of the ship that you might be heading towards a concrete wall. And if you do hit a concrete wall at top speed, you're going to pay for it.
Is there like a damage meter on the ship?
There isn't a damage meter on the ship, but all of those stations I was mentioning can be individually damaged.
Oh, right. Okay.
So there's the button that you press to operate the ship can like catch on fire or have an electrical damage. The sails can be damaged. Basically, any system in the ship, if it catches on fire, then you will need to run to the water hose, which there is a water hose. You need to grab it from its station at the top and back of the ship and run around until you find the fire and put it out. And if 3 fires are going on at once, well, let me tell you, it's a little bit hair-raising. And then there might be like the fire might cause electrical damage. So then you might have to run to the electrical repair tool and get that and run it to its station. So a lot of juggling, and you feel, emotional strain when the vehicle wears down. The vehicle that you'd spent so much time maintaining and operating, when it wears down after, essentially avoidable damage that you inflicted upon it, you feel bad. You feel bad. It's because you're hurting your companion.
Like Pacific Drive, there was this real sense of ritual, basically, in how you're interacting with this vehicle, and even though it gets quite repetitive, it's this sense of mastery that you find over, like, a sense of coziness in that ritual and repetition. It's sort of Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance, or something, I guess.
That's right. I think Jane McGonigal called that the flow state. Essentially, you're doing a task that is inherently not that difficult, but just the ritual, the act of doing it, following those steps, and just keeping all the meters going and all the components moving is deeply rewarding in its own right. So when that happens in this game, it feels good. Couple of other details about this game. The puzzles that I mentioned. The puzzles are never too hard. None of them really stopped me in my place.
Sort of block pushing puzzles, right? Like this genre tends to pull on some pretty familiar territory.
Certainly. And part of me thinks maybe even that the puzzles are not supposed to stump you, right? This isn't like an old school text adventure game where it's supposed to stop you in your tracks. Because inherently stopping in your tracks in a game about movement is counterproductive.
You want to keep the momentum up, and it's just enough. Like, it's a bit of like a brain teaser puzzle, I guess. What was the brain training thing on DS? It's like, you know what you need to do, just you need to go through the motions. But that's part of the vibes and the atmosphere that it's establishing.
That's right, and it's changing a pace. You don't want to. It's not a game just about operating the ship. Because that itself could be pretty simplistic. It's about stopping and starting. It's about repeating these cycles. It's about feeling a little bit desperate, and if you're able to come across a bunch of fuel tanks, you feel really good, and you're excited about setting off again. So I think they handled the pace and the flow of that pretty well. There was only one sequence in the game that was I catastrophically failed. And it's a pretty nice set piece when that one moment does happen. And I think I mostly failed. I failed 2 or 3 times, which is surprising because nothing else in this game was challenging. Nothing else in this game was so challenging that it stopped me in my tracks, other than just wanting to go to bed or whatever. But the one moment that I failed multiple times, it was a little bit frustrating. And I think most of the time I failed because I didn't know what it was asking me to do. Because, like I said, there's no dialogue. There's no quest descriptions, there's no words of any kind. There's a couple words like, fuel and engine or whatever printed inside your vehicle, but that's
It's not like you
about
can
it.
get lost though, right? It's not one like one of these JRPGs we were discussing today, like where I have to go explore the whole world and talk to everyone to find out what my goal is. Generally, it's go right, push the levers, like limited
Right.
options for what you could possibly do.
You cannot get lost, but you may not see the trigger that they want to or
Or
expect you
know
to
what's
push or pull.
interactable, I guess sometimes
Yeah.
is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Later on in the game, there are some kind of larger moments where you feel like truly tiny in the grand scale of what they're created. There's just a spoiler. There's another vehicle in play in this game as well, and eventually you'll reach your goal, and it comes to mostly satisfying end. Like I said, this game is short, and it's not that revolutionary, but I think for the short time that you play it, it feels rewarding and challenging enough. And this is kind of like a 2D, like walking simulator game. There's nothing about it is supposed to wear you down. You're just supposed to go through the motions, experience the challenges that they throw in your path, and sort of feel the feelings, those vibes that you were alluding to, as that the directors intended you to feel as you're seeing those scenes play out. And it was an enjoyable few hours of a game, 3 or 4 hours. I think it was well worth playing. I recommend it. Yeah, that's Far Lone Sales, and I should say that there's another Far game.
Did you get a sequel?
That's right. The sequel, which I have not played, came out in 2022, and it's called Far Changing Tides.
That's
And
right. Yes.
it looks fairly similar. You got another vehicle, and you got to control it yet again.
Yeah, I've been meaning to track it down and finish that off at some point. But also, I mentioned Planet of Lana is another game that I really enjoyed in that oeuvre, and its sequel I've been meaning to get to. But if you like the sense of the vehicle interaction, another game I can recommend is one called Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time. Are you familiar with that, Mark?
I've definitely heard of it. It's a co-op game, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's 2D, but you're moving in space. You can move up or down and left to right. But like, there's various stations like where to attack the enemies, someone has to man the guns and point and shoot. But to activate the shields, someone has to go to that station and then point the shields in one direction because I can only face one direction at a time. And to move is a different station. So I only played it like 2-player a little bit, but it did have that cool sort of co-op, bridge crew vibe. But within that 2D setting.
Nice, nice. I'm just going to mention another game very, very briefly since we talked about discussing a smattering of games. This is a game that I and my whole family just started playing recently because it's a new game. The game is called Tomodachi Life, Living the Dream. It was released just a couple of weeks ago on April 16th, 2026, so this year. And this is a sequel to I think it was a Nintendo DS game or whatever,
Sounds
or
about
an
right,
original
yeah.
platform. This was developed by Nintendo EPD, so internally, published by Nintendo, of course. And this is an interesting game. It's really hard to describe. They call it a social simulation game. It is single player, but I think this will be a hoot if you have other people you live with, roommates,
It can be collaborative,
family.
even if it's not co-op, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's really interesting. There are some hitches too. I'm just going to tell about the first few minutes playing this game because kind of like my whole family is in the first few minutes of playing this game. So you can add me's to your
The
game.
me's are back.
You have to add me's to your game to get you going. And thankfully, you can import me's that might already be in your system.
I was going to ask, like, is Amii's saved on the Switch anywhere? I guess they are.
They are if you made them on the Switch, or the Switch 2 in this case.
I didn't think there were like any games that utilize them, but maybe not.
Some games do. There are some games that utilize Me. I think there's something called like Miitopia or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a cartridge title that was released on Switch 1. And of course there are Mii's on other platforms like 3DS and stuff like that, but I don't think you can export them. Strangely enough, I have Mii artwork on my Nintendo account because you needed to upload a Mii to get your custom me artwork printed on your Nintendo Museum badge
Oh.
in Kyoto. You had to connect it online. So I did that unintentionally, but I still couldn't import it. So I had to recreate a me on the hardware first outside of the game and then import it. So I did that. My oldest did that. My oldest is into games, so they downloaded like other me's of other characters. Like they downloaded some characters from what was that whatever that Disney cartoon, something Falls.
Gravity Falls. Nice.
Gravity Falls
So
characters.
there's like a database of player-made me's?
Yeah, they found it somehow and imported it. But of course, if you have me's kicking around from your family members, your friends on the system, you can import them, and that's what we did. But I kind of had to wait because like my eldest kid did it, and then I tried to convince my youngest kid to do it, so they did it, and then just today my wife started to add her me into the game, so I finally had the whole collection. Funny enough, my wife started playing today for the first time, and because all those other me's were created, she lapped me. I got up to 3 companions, and she had 4 island dwellers, and basically the game like unlocks things tied to how many me's are on your system. So it's not like Animal Crossing where it's like, hey, you've reached the end of the first day, that's all you can do. You got to wait 2 or 3 more days before you can expand or something like that. This game seems to let you, like steamroll it if you want to. And of course you could, from day one, load up your island with whatever me's you want. They don't have to be family members. They don't have to be real people. And interesting, my instinct and the instinct of everyone in my family was, I'm going to create a me of me. And I'm going to import them first, right? But you can also import a me that's not you. You can import a me of, like, Avatar The Last Airbender characters and just make them hang out together, because this game is a social simulation game.
Another one of those sort of ant farm games, right? Let's create a bunch of characters and see what they do.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating, this game design. It's hard to describe because I don't think I've seen another game like it. It's not like a physics-based or technological ant farm like Oxygen Not Included. It's about these kind of like paper dolls which you can dress up and you can decorate and you can style and you can tweak their voices, you can push these levers to adjust their personality. And another fascinating thing is, in my household, unlike Animal Crossing, you don't share one island. You have an island, my oldest kid has an island, my youngest kid has an island, and my wife has an island.
That's unusually permissive of Nintendo.
Yeah, and they're all separate. And even though each of our islands have all 4 of our family members, you import them separately. You can tweak their appearance separately, because Mii's, the original Mii's, are lower fidelity and have fewer options than the Tomodachi Life Mii's. So you can import the simple ones into the system, but you cannot export the complicated ones out of the system, which we discovered when my wife tried to set up her Mii. And this is another interesting phenomenon which we discovered today, is you can assign the personalities of each of the Mii's separately. So there are those personality dials I told you about that follow basically like these 5 stats, like honest or honesty, there's coolness or gregariousness, quirkiness, and seriousness.
So I guess there's a bit of The Sims baked in here too.
Yes, but it's weird that it's like not consistent to the me. It's separate. So like my vision of how my wife can be different from her vision of herself. And it could be different from my oldest kid's vision of my wife's character. So all of our characters have like different personalities based on which island that they belong to and which person that they belong to. And you can choose a different name that all the islanders call the player. So the player has a name. So in my world, all my islanders call me senpai or something like that. And then my wife's world, all the characters call her sister or whatever. So just a bizarre just like smashing together of things. And eventually, as you play, you gain access to more things. You can buy clothes. You can dress up your characters differently, of course, as you would expect. But one of the coolest things about this game is that as you level up and you form relationships between the characters, you unlock interesting personality quirks. So you can give each character a unique quirk, like the way that they walk, or the way that they stand idle, or the way that they introduce themselves to another character. And these are kind of unlocks that you can assign to each character. And these are really delightful to apply because, once again, you're making your version of Ami its own distinctive character. And every time you see it happen, you can't help but feel a little bit delight that you set that up. And you can choose a quirk or characteristic that's just so for a person that you know so well. And maybe it's like an actor that you know so well, or maybe it's a fictional character that you just would love. Like maybe it's like, characters from Free Ren or something like that running around your island, or Naruto, or what have you. Just the possibilities are endless. And the mixing and the matching is really interesting. There's like CNN style news segments that break out. And of course, when your island only has one resident, that one resident is the newscaster and the audience for the news at the same time. So just hilarious.
So are you coming to come up with
like
any
that.
of the actual, like, what are you doing with the characters? Are they just living their own world and you're watching them? Or are you inputting what you want them to do in any way?
In many ways, yes. A lot of the ways you're just reacting, and that's part and parcel to the way the game is designed. Like The Sims, the characters have needs and desires and requirements, so they need to be fed. Thankfully, they don't need to be watered or go to the bathroom, because there are no bathrooms on this island. So you need to introduce them to new food. Thankfully, there's a grocery store that has a different selection of food items each day. And then you can give gifts to your friends, like clothing, outfits, or you can give them personality quirks, like I mentioned. You can give them gifts that are static, like they just get them and they appreciate them. Or there are gifts that are interactable, so you can give them a guitar, and if you give them a guitar, then they'll continually, throughout the game, have like emotes where they'll play the guitar, walk around town, play the guitar on the beach or whatever. So you're kind of like seeding these interactions, but it's very much like out mechanical, right? It's like, I plug this tool into this slot and this character will behave this way. It's just there's so many dials and switches that you can push and pull on, and eventually I think you can have 6 or more islanders on your island. So I can imagine like the permutations are just gonna kind of explode. So my family is just having a hoot all day setting this game up across our various accounts, and I think eventually that'll die out. But I look forward to having a game where I can just like check in, load it up, play it for 10 minutes, check things out, have a little chuckle at how things are progressing, and then just log off. And it's not compulsive. I don't have to do it, but it's just interesting and a fun way to kind of have this interaction with the rest of my family.
I don't know if I'd feel a bit aimless in just knowing what to do with them. Like, they're not, again, I've always struggled with like sandbox games like Minecraft, even like setting your own goals in that sense. And like, there's not really any friction here, right? It's not to say that it's a toy, but it feels like a more interactive, like a soundboard or something, I guess, right?
It is very much a toy, but you are not without direction. The game always tells you what it wants.
Okay.
In fact, sometimes there's almost too many things that it wants you to do. Like, I just wanted to play for 5 or 10 minutes before I stopped to record this podcast, and like there were some things that I just couldn't finish before I handed off the controller to my youngest kids. So if you are concerned that there won't be things to do, there are plenty of things to do. And you could also, like my wife showed, play for a few hours in a row, because it'll just keep doling out new things for you to do. And while there's content available, the game will continue to expand, and presumably there'll be proper expansions at some point.
Awesome.
So that's interesting. I'll give a deeper deeper thoughts on it as we get deeper into the game.
Excellent.
Okay. Want to cover some dessert?
Yeah, I think we better get to it. It's beginning late here.
Yeah. Okay. How about yourself? You want to go?
Yeah, I have a really quick one today in terms of trying some new styles of books that I've been exploring. I grabbed one recently called Strange Houses by Uketsu. And that author there is a bit of a pseudonym. This is a Japanese book, if it's not clear. It's I think they wear a mask in their picture on the book. It's very much I don't know. There's a bit of a character behind it. I'm trying to think of an equivalent, but it's something of this is a horror stories, right? So it's very much playing into the mysterious, mysterious background of these stories, but. It's a strange book in that it's basically about a journalist who is investigating this murder and begrudgingly becomes obsessed with the layout of this house where it happened. And I mean, it feels very much like there's a whole subgenre of these films about, investigating something terrible that happened and you get too close, right? And you get pulled into this whirlpool. And it's a little bit of that as he gradually... You start chaining between other houses and how is this? Why is this? How are they connected? And what's the weird layout in this one? And it eventually becomes this very preposterous story. These people are basically. You're looking at this floor plan of the house and you notice inconsistencies. What might look very normal, and then you start looking at the nitty gritty and it's like, oh, why is there a space in between these walls here? Why is this aligned above this room below here? And you start zeroing on these small details, and it becomes this real sort of sense of voyeurism as they're imagining the people living in this space and what are they doing. And I said. They're jumping to these huge, leaps of logic in terms of suggesting what these spaces might be used for. That largely all is proven out in this very strange way. But again, it is tapping into something, that sense of voyeurism and seeing a floor space and that sort of magic of imagining other people and that sort of what are they doing here? What are their lives? And a bit of that sort of imagination role play. Unfortunately, the actual prose is a very... It's not... It's very matter-of-fact and workmanlike, and I don't know how much of that is lost in translation, but it reads very much like a creepypasta on a Reddit post. There isn't really much, evocative imagery or characterization. It's very just matter-of-fact talking through, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. A lot of it is presented actually like a script, like a dialogue between characters, but it's not particularly I don't know that it feels very well written in that sense. You're mostly there for the gimmick of the setting and the structure there. Like I said, it feels like a Reddit post that went a little too long. This is a short book. It's only 150 pages, and a third of that probably is just the various diagrams of the houses. But they get repeated. They repeat the same diagram, but now it's this little circle here, or now it's slightly zoomed in, and so that feels a little unnecessary. So it's a little long, a little overplayed, but it's a cool concept for a very breezy read.
You mentioned Reddit. I happen to know that a lot of novels in Japan are written serially and quite often just freely available on social media. I think that this happens with some Western authors as well. But basically, you could imagine a platform like Twitter where it had a short character span, and then basically an author just writes a new chapter every day or every week.
Interesting.
So sometimes these books are kind of a culmination of a serialized piece like that. So perhaps that's the root of it. And definitely there is a range of different types of prose style in Japanese, just as there is in English, of some more flowery type descriptive authors, and then there's some more kind of terse, more matter-of-fact authors. So I think probably the translators did a good job of capturing the spirit of the writing, which probably means it was kind of terse and dry to begin with.
It's going for a very particular audience. But, I mentioned last week, talking about Hot House, how it had been written as a series of short stories and then was, connected into a novel, and somehow, something's lost there in trying to piece it together into one larger piece of fiction. Like the connective tissue isn't there. Maybe it's something similar here, where it doesn't. It's a cool concept, but like there's not really enough connective tissue to keep it interesting over the course of a whole book.
Right. I think a lot of early Isaac Asimov novels were collected serializations, like the iRobot series was a bunch of different
I like that one actually. That was really
articles in the sci-fi magazines, for instance. So, yeah, it's an interesting artifact of how these sorts of things are published. Okay, I'm going to cover an item that there's no other time to cover it because I watched this in person last night. And I think there won't be any other performances because tonight, I believe, was the last night. So I watched a performance by the Vancouver Opera Company of Giacomo Puccini's opera La Boheme. I've seen this a few times over the years at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. It's a well-loved, very, very commonly performed opera there. So, I didn't have a lot of surprises. But it was my pleasure to take my youngest kid, who is in choirs and things like that and loves to perform on stage. So it was nice to share that with them. Vancouver Opera puts on like a Puccini every couple of seasons, so not that surprising. And this production was pretty traditional. Sometimes operas will recontextualize a production.
I was going to ask, there's not really any sense of interpretation here. It's just you know exactly what you're going in for.
They played it very straight.
Okay.
They put the characters in the period pieces. This is basically the story is the inspiration for the stage musical Rent. Actually, it's the same plot, and most of the characters are the same as well. There's like interpretations of all of the main characters translated into Rent. So it's the same story, poor artists living short and fast lives in desperate situation, facing poverty and illness. So if you're familiar with that, you'll be familiar with this story, which, my youngest and I had watched Rent, the film together. So that was nice to share that. I said this is a very traditional production, but the performances were great. The characters were very charismatic. They gelled very well. And I was pleased to see for the first time over 3 times I've seen Boheme in Vancouver that the 2 of the main cast members, of which there's only 6 main characters, were non-white performers. Hadn't seen that ever before in a performance of La Boheme, so that was nice to see. Great performances too, very, very serviceable and very moving. Puccini operas are popular because they're actually fairly contemporary sounding. They are, very melodic. They introduce things like leitmotifs, which are something you might be familiar with as a film lover. Like a film like Star Wars will have a theme for Vader, and it'll have a theme for Leia, and it'll theme for Han Solo. When that music starts playing, it's referring back to this character. You hear the repetition of the aria that introduces the character. That character is walking on stage. It's very, very cinematic that way. So that part of it plays very well, even to modern audiences. Speaking of modern audiences, this is an Italian opera. It was in Italian. I prepared my kid for that. Pretty much like a film. This, instead of having subtitles, this production has surtitles. So there's a little screen at the top of the stage that has projections of what the characters are saying in English as they are singing them. And this most of the time works fairly well, except that there's a lot of singing on top of each other. There's some really complex scenes, especially in the second act. Amazing second act, by the way, actually. They did it's generally well known to be a large group scene. There's hundreds of people on stage. There's children, there's adults, there's jugglers, there's, in this case, this is the first time I've seen this too, they were gymnasts. There was these ribbon dancers, and then there's these stilt walkers. So it was very nice to see that they were breathing new life into this old piece. And I thought I couldn't be surprised with a production of Boheme. But I was. And on another note, it was nice to see that the audience was a mixture of the traditional kind of old, moneyed individuals that are generally the art patrons you see around the world. But there were also kind of younger and more diverse opera goers as well, not the least of which was my kid. We spent a lot of time just kind of just people watching and looking at the fashion of people dressing up, as we did a little bit too.
So did the kids get much out of it, do you think?
Yeah, I think my youngest really enjoyed it. They said that they liked it and would go again. So maybe we'll have another opera. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I had season tickets, and I really enjoyed kind of getting an education in opera that way. And I've enjoyed it ever since. And they really only ever put on like 6 or 7 different productions at Vancouver Opera. Every season they put on a more experimental one, which is always interesting. It's a little bit more challenging, so sometimes that's hard, but Puccini always goes over well. So that was enjoyable. Another great performance from the Vancouver Opera, and I think the cast did a great job.
Excellent. I can't say I have much experience with opera, to be honest, but sounds like a good place to start.
Yeah, it's a crowd pleaser for sure. And I think my youngest and I talked about this, is that quite often they'll do productions of staged operas and plays, or ballets too, on movie theaters. So sometimes you'll see at the Cineplex, they'll be like,
right,
we're going to have this production.
Like simulcast or something. Yeah,
exactly. So like that's an easy way to step into it, because you still have the drama of having it on the big screen. And you'll probably get a great cast, like someone from the Metropolitan Opera Company out of New York or something like that. So I recommend that, or you could always stream or get a DVD from the library.
So I think Ted's telling me that it's time to wrap things up.
Well, Ted's the boss, as we know, so let's finish it there. All right, Daniel, tell the listeners what they should know about the
If you have any questions today on the games we've discussed or on your favorite opera, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
That's right. You can check out videos of our episodes that we put up every time they come out on YouTube. Leave us likes and comments there. Subscribe, of course, share with people you think will enjoy it. If you do want to catch up on our earlier episodes, the earliest episodes are only in audio, so go subscribe, listen to them in a podcatcher of your choosing. We're on Spotify and Apple Music and all those different platforms, so go check us out as well, like and share also. How else can people follow the Omni Gamers Club, Daniel?
You can find it at Blue Sky at omnigamers.club, and I also at Blue Sky at Board Game Feast.
All right. Any other shout-outs we should give?
Just quickly, I forgot to write the dates down here. I'll put it in the show notes, though, that ProtoCon has announced its next date, basically coming up in November here in Vancouver. That is the convention all about playtesting board games and TTRPGs. So we have a new venue, bigger, going to have some more sort of satellite events around that. Very excited to see what's going to happen. So, yeah, keep an eye out.
Very cool. That's your deadline, folks. If you got a game idea going, get it ready for ProtoCon, and we'll share that date as soon as we can.
Yes, the link has been announced. Sorry, the date has been announced. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, we got it, Ted. You're the boss. It's time. All right, let's let the people go. And for everyone else that's not Ted out there, have a balanced diet of games.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.